Hey everybody, Nick here, and today I got a video for you where I'm going to talk about my EDC. I know that that's actually what I do in every video, but I figured I would do something a little bit special. But before I go any further, I want to thank, of course, my Patreon patrons who continue to make the channel, even thinking about doing something on the channel possible, and who I really do appreciate your patience. It's been pretty rough out there, and I know my output hasn't been the same as it always was, but nonetheless, I appreciate you. You're wonderful people, as well as the people on my Discord, etc. Lovely, lovely folks. I also want to thank the manufacturers who sent along some of the items on the table here, and that's not though why these things are on the table. Instead, these things are on the table because these are the things I have been reaching for. Just to give you a bit of context, I am burned out, and this is not that kind of burnout that you get after a long week, or just like, oh, I just need some time in the arms. This is like my soul is burnt to a crisp level of burnout. This is the level where you've been asked to pour and pour and pour from that, fountain of intellectual, mental, and physical energy that you got, and you've been empty for, 3 months and you still having to pour, right? That's that level. And I'm working on it, right? This is not a cry for help. I'm fine. No, I'm not fine, but at the very least, I'm making some steps that will hopefully improve that thing. But as a result, though, I have not really been able to think about the world as a gear reviewer. Sure, I've taken a look at some stuff, and in fact, some of this stuff hasn't yet been formally reviewed. These two come to mind here. But nevertheless, I've just been a gear user. I've just been a person who wakes up in the morning and goes, okay, oh boy, what a day. What am I carrying? And I just reach for something that sparks joy. Reach for something that seems like it'll be the right call. And the stuff that you see on the table here are the stuff that gets reached for most, right? That doesn't mean that I haven't carried other stuff. Of course not. And there are some other things that I have carried or worn, for instance, that are actually getting ready to be reviewed, that are going to get an actual look at here. But at the same time, a lot of what I've just been doing is kind of surviving. And what goes in my pocket then is sort of a very different question than I can usually answer. What happens when I'm just acting like a normal collector, a normal lover of gear, rather than somebody who does YouTube or a reviewer or anything else like that? So I want to talk to you about some of the stuff that has brought me a lot of joy and that keeps hopping into my pocket even when everything else is going crazy. So let's just kind of start from the side here. If I'm ever looking for something fancy or formal, this ends up being the choice. This is Mitchell Clark. It's a mini gun stock. I don't know what the technical name for it is, but it's a gun stock from him that is mini, and it is lovely. This is, at this point, one of the nicer knives I own. It's actually a Damacor, but it's been fully polished over. It's got this edge-cut carbon fiber. It's just absolutely lovely, and the action on it is amazing. This is really, really great. It's in the top, 1% of knives I've handled, and I was very lucky to get on his books, and he was very willing to make one of these guys, sized for my hands particularly. But I have loved this knife and have been carrying it a lot anytime I need to be a little bit fancier, right? This is a Spyderco Paramilitary 2. I'm sorry, this is the Para 3. I also have a Para 2 that looks like this. But this is wearing a set of custom scales by RG Custom Metalworks that really class the joint up a lot. Blade here is just an S45 VN variant, but these scales are just lovely. They're beautifully machined objects. They make the knife carry a little bit better, a little bit different. I've been a big fan of this knife, and I'm even more of a fan when I get these scales on there. I will sometimes carry the Para 2 version of it as well. Here, grab that bad boy. Wearing a very similar set of scales here, but at the same time, I've mostly been carrying the smaller guy because that's a lot of what I carry. This here, of course, is the Grimsmo Knives Rask. This is the smallest knife that Grimsmo make at the moment. They have a new one that's coming out, the Integral, that rest and believe, rest assured. Rest and believe, actually, I like that. God, I need to rest and believe. Anyways, that rest assured I'll be looking at as soon as I can. But for the moment, the Rask is really the knife that's closest to my size range. I've, carried the Norseman on occasion, but this one slips into my pocket fairly regularly, just because it's a really nice piece. It's just, there's a lot of joy to it. So the Rask is another knife that I've been carrying, and to be clear here, in some ways, and I've said this before, for a lot of these things, I'm carrying the story. I'm carrying the person. I'm carrying the maker as much as anything else. And that's why you're going to see sort of a bias towards small makers in this. I've realized that increasingly, especially as the market floods and floods and floods with more and more makers from factories that the only reason they're making knives is because they heard you can make money making knives, it's increasingly enjoyable for me to carry something made by somebody who I know or care, who I know and who I know cares about knife making. Somebody who's putting in artistry and mastery rather than just producing a product well. Those are kind of different categories. Maybe I'll make a video about that one of these days. But the knife game has so changed since I got into it, right? Especially with the absolute explosion of Chinese-made brands that are just coming out of nowhere. It's a very, very different world. But anyway, so the Rask is one of those knives that I carry in part because I really respect the Grimsmos and the ideals that they're kind of putting forward in knife making, and because, you know, I want to support that, right? But I would definitely carry the smaller one if I had it there. Speaking of smaller makers, this is the Herman Knives Micro Sting. This is just a freaking gorgeous knife. It's completely over the top in many ways, with the Damacore, with the Timascus, etc. It's sort of a fancier knife, but it's not quite as fancy as this guy is in terms of its sensibilities. But this is something I will carry in a situation where I don't need a whole lot of blade, but I do want a whole lot of art, and it brings me a lot of joy. Another from Herman Knives, actually, is this guy, which is actually in for review. This is a loaner knife that I've been, they've allowed me to carry here. But this is the Herman Knives B. And it's a new model from them, and it's quite good. It's very nice in that it has a good bit of blade to it, but the ergonomics are really good on it. It feels really nice in my given relatively small hands, and it just carries well. It's small. It's a nice size. I am absolutely going to be picking one of these guys up in a finish and style that's a little bit closer to my norm. That is completely over the freaking top. But this is a base model, and yeah, so keep an eye out for a video for this guy soon. But both of these Hermans have been carried a fair bit because, well, again, I like Herman. I don't know him as a human, obviously, but I like the work he's doing. And again, it runs in that artistry, that giving a damn about knives world that keeps coming up for me. Another company that comes up a lot for me is TRM, Three Rivers Manufacturing. This right here is the TRM Neutron. You can tell that I'm not being an Instagrammer because I have some variety of something on the edge of this, and I should probably clean off. But anyways, I digress. The TRM Neutron wearing some titanium scales. And, yeah, it's a spectacular knife, right? If somebody said, Nick, you can only keep one knife, there's a decent chance this could end up being it. It just works really well. It's really excellent in the pocket. It feels really nice in the hand. It's a beautifully machined piece. And frankly, again, I love the TRM folks, not in the sense that I am completely biased towards them, but in the sense that I really think that they're doing great things, and I think that they're doing great work, and frankly, I like supporting the home team, and although they're on the other side of the country, that's sure pretty home to me. So I'm a big fan of the TRM folks, and I'm a big fan of the TRM Neutron, too, in this case, generally. I'm also a nerd, and so it makes sense that I might carry the TRM Nerd. This is a really nice knife for a situation where I need something that is able to cut but is completely non-threatening. I take this out of my pocket and some people will look at it and go, oh, art. And other people will look at it and go, oh, that's adorable. But very few people are going, oh my God, I'm calling the Hague, or the equivalent, right? I mean, even Edna from accounting should be able to cope with this guy coming out of my pocket to open up a bag of chips, you know? And so this is a really nice choice for days where I want something small, or for days where I want something that is sort of unassuming and non-scary, right? Because, like, you know, as much as this is a lovely thing, it might scare Edna a little bit more than, for instance, the little nerd there. Speaking of great folks in the industry, this right here is a Monterey Bay Knives, the River Otter, with a slightly different blade shape, which I like a lot more than the original Sea Otter, and also keeps the blade away from the edge back here. And it's just great. In many ways, it feels a little bit Shabazz-ish. It feels like it scratches some of the same itches the Shabazz, but it's got an action that, frankly, I just like better. And this blade shape is good, and I really, again, feel free to call this bias, but I like to make maker a lot. I like Sanford, I like Ray Laconico, I like the solid folks, right? And so, and they're making these guys in the USA, which is a joy. Not every MBK is made in the USA, but it's lovely to see them putting in the effort and working really hard to make sure they are being honest about that claim. I very much want to support that, and so as a result, and this knife is just a very, very, very good daily knife. It's a good daily companion, right? And it works well. It's unassuming. It works, right? So I've been carrying this guy a lot. It's real easy to find its way into my pocket. The weirdest, yeah, actually, I think the weirdest knife that's on this table right now is this little guy right here. Okay, yeah, that's the weirdest. I opened it up and then remembered, like, yep, that's the weirdest. But this is a Serge Panchenko Rook, featuring the Hawk lock, as well as the toggle detent from them, as well as a very Serge design. This thing, oh boy, it's expensive. They're hard to get. But it's so unique. It's so different. It's so unlike any other damn thing. You take this out of your pocket, and people are just like, "What the hell, Nick? Who hurt you? What's wrong with you?" And you know what? I kind of love it. Right? Because that's a long story, and I don't actually have to answer it. Anyways, I digress. But this is a very, very cool piece, and it's unique, and it's different, and it's very much Serge, and it's very much made carefully by hand. There's a joy in this guy. There's a lot of joy in it. And so, given that it is so far off the beaten path relative to everything else, it can be very refreshing. That can be very, very nice. I'm also a big fan of this little guy right here. This, of course, is the Holt Knives, is their Morpheus knife. And this is another fancy knife, right? And you're going to see a trend here. I carry some fancy stuff when I'm, left to my own devices. But this is a joy. It's got some Damasteel here, which is nicely polished. It's, again, with Damasteel clip. It's got a beautiful anodization to it, even a Damasteel backspacer. And it just feels good. It's in a nice size range. The action on it remains amazing. It's a beautifully made knife. And it works. It works really well. It's really expensive, that's for sure. But it brings me some joy, and so there we are. So right here is the Rob Johnson's, I believe this to be the Cypress, although I may actually be wrong now that I'm thinking about it. It's been a long day. But anyways, this is a lovely knife, and especially with a replacement clip, and I'm going to have a video soon that kind of shows me installing that and talks about it. But with this replacement clip from the maker, it's even better. The only thing I kind of dislike about this guy is that it is front flip only. And in practice, front flipping, it's cool, it's fun, but it's probably my least favorite method of deploying a knife at this point. Possibly excepting like a nail nick, which, okay, that is my least favorite by an absolute mile and a half. But nonetheless, it's a cool piece. It's beautifully machined. It's very attractive. It's got a lot of joy to it. The more I carry it, the more I like it. I like the thin edge, the thin blade. I do kind of wish that this blade were more polished rather than blasted. It ends up feeling kind of sad, honestly, that they didn't, keep the shiny theme up. But the knife is great, and often ends up in my pocket. And then the cheapest knife on the table here by a pretty substantial margin. This little guy, this is a bronze-handled Elijah Isham design. This is the McKenna by Civivi. I don't know if these are still being made. I hope they are, because it's a great design, and because, well, frankly, it's pretty unique, as were a lot of Elijah's pieces. Elijah Isham died around 2 years ago now. Still a big loss to the industry, still one I feel regularly. But I carry this guy because it's a great little knife, right? It is a front flipper, again, but it has a really nice action. I like this heft to it. I like this bronze feeling to it. And frankly, I liked Elijah a lot. And I think he's one of the best designers who's been in the game. And I think this is a nice example of the kind of work that he does. And something that is a little bit more carryable than, I don't know, your We Knives Dress-Cathon, right? It's a lovely knife, but it's not exactly the most practical thing for EDC. But nevertheless, so that's a way for me to sort of acknowledge and appreciate the work, even, now that he's gone. So there's that. Those are the knives that have most often been hopping into my pocket. There have been some other ones. Actually, this guy is it's the Civivi Knives Vision, the Vision by Sneck Tan, and with the exception of really designed by Snecks on the Damascus, Yikes. This is actually the Vision as it should have been made to start with. This is orders of magnitude better than the I Knives Vision. And so it's actually been a bit of a joy, right? I'll do a full review. I got my beef, but it's actually hopped into my pocket maybe a little bit more than I expected it to. That's been a lovely thing. Watch-wise, this one's had maybe a little bit more variety for me, right? I kind of cycle through my collection on a pretty ongoing basis, but the ones that kind of stick on my wrist on occasion, where it's just like 4 days, where it's just like, I'm not even thinking about it, I'm just constantly using it. This guy's the Manta Ocean King. It's the newest version of it. Love this watch. Really, really love it. It is relatively basic. It is very boring, but I mean that in the sense of it's a great tool and it just disappears. The clasp is amazing. It's comfortable. The band is great. There's just not a lot to dislike about the Ocean King here. So this has been on my wrist regularly. Similarly, this little Seiko here has been an absolute joy. It's the 62 Miss, 65 Miss. Either way, Merry 62 Miss. Maybe 63. I don't know. They need to use a reasonable naming scheme for their damn watches. But anyways, this guy ends up on my wrist a fair amount. It's on a strap, though, that is by Uncle Straps, with their clasp. It does not have a quick adjust, but it just happens to fit my wrist well, and that's achieved by having a micro adjust here, as well as removable. It works, and it's a very nice watch, generally speaking, pretty accurate. And then the Formex Reef GMT here is really hard to kick off my wrist. It's a little big, a little heavy. I would sure love one of these in titanium. Formex, make the Reef in titanium. Anyways, I digress. But I love this watch, and it's real easy to throw on, especially if I'm trying to be a little bit fancier or something like that. But not dressy, just fancy. And pen-wise, honestly, my pen selection has been very boring. It has been one of these three things. Either one of the Smooth Precision pens, watches, wow, pens. So there's the Dragon Scale pattern. I also have a Valhalla one that I like a lot. I mourn this company on a regular basis. My favorite pen company, I think by a pretty strong margin, just up and died. The guy's fine. He's working on other things. But it just went from, 100 miles an hour doing amazing work to just like overnight, and I just it was really sad, frankly. I think the pen industry lost some stuff. The Grimsmo Knives, pens, I suppose, in this case, Saga. Great pen. A lot of fun. Really nice. Works well. Matches the Rask. Can't really argue with it. It's ridiculous. I don't know that I necessarily recommend it unless you were a big fan of mechanical pens and want to support the Grimsmos, but it regularly lives in my pocket. This right here is the Schoen design. It's absolutely just a lovely, lovely pen. Schoen does great work, and I can't wait to get one of those Monarch nibs in stub when it happens. But when I carry this guy, I just toss it into my pocket, and they're all lovely. So, anyways, that's kind of where I've been, right? I'm going to still keep posting content, obviously. I'm going to still get some videos to make here, and now that I'm kind of digging out a little bit, my goal is to, make videos as I allow, or I'm sorry, as time allows, as frankly, the amount of energy left in my soul allows. That's the big part right there. But I figured since I was in this situation where it's just like I haven't had the energy to be a gear reviewer, I just was a gearhead, figured I'd show you some of the stuff that brought me joy and talk to you a little bit about why and, highlight some makers who I think need some love. Okay. I don't know that all of these folks need love. I think at this point, Clark's got enough love to last him several lifetimes in terms of book orders. But nonetheless, all of these makers do amazing work. And I figured I'd show you what actually ends up happening when I'm on my own. So anyways, I hope you're all hanging in there. I am too. And most of all, I hope that you have yourselves just an absolutely wonderful rest of your day. Bye now.